Well, good morning. Thank you for joining me on Conversations with Caregivers.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Happy to. I'm Whitney Bishop. I am an author and coach and consultant here based in Louisville, Kentucky. I am the author of a book called Morning Meditation Nuggets, which is now expanding into a series. The next one, of course, being focused on caregiving and caregivers.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
So what was because you were also a caregiver for quite some time, and
That's
that
correct.
you wrote that first book while you were caregiving for someone.
That's right. It published just at the time that we were bringing him home to for his last little bit. So yeah.
So tell me more about that. Who was it that you took care of?
So it
And
was my father, and as many father-daughter relationships are, ours was complicated, and we didn't really have much
mm,
of a relationship as adults. And in probably September of last year, we, as a family, started to notice some changes in him, and we needed to be more engaged, right, in what was happening with his life. And so we began to do that. And so from September until maybe February of 2020, he was in and out of hospitals, and just we were trying to help him in his own apartment. He's single and lived alone with home health, but that last hospitalization really set the tone for what was to come. And
mm,
at the same time, COVID was shutting down places like long-term care facilities where he was transferred to rehabilitate.
right.
And a lack of access to him really did not allow us to advocate for him in the way that he probably needed to be advocated for. So about July, June, really, I'd had enough. And I began to probe with the social worker, what were some other options? Could I volunteer? Could I work there? What did I need to do in order to be able to have access to him?
Mm,
And they said, well, if you have I said, if I work here, do I have access to him? And they said, yeah, anytime.
right.
I said, well, what do you have open? And they said, well, we've got a dishwasher position, and we have something in the kitchen, and we have something for personal care aides. And I said, put me in the kitchen. I know how to do that. Put me in the kitchen. And they did.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I worked there for 5 shifts, and it did not take long for me to realize that we needed to get him out of there. And we did. And we brought him home, and Hospice joined us on that journey. And for 6 weeks, we had um, a really incredible experience taking care of him, loving him, and then letting him go.
There's like so many facets to your story in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you just covered a lot of territory. So I think the first question I would have is what were some of the things that you were noticing? Because he was single, living in the apartment, and several family members were noticing things. So, like, what were you guys noticing? And were you all on the same page? Because I appreciated you saying that your relationship was complicated.
Yeah, it was pretty distant, really, with all of us. I mean, we cared about each other, but we weren't involved in each other's lives on a day-to-day basis. We saw each other at holidays and special functions. We didn't really we weren't really integrated into each other's lives very much. But my dad did go visit my mom and his son frequently. So he would disappear for weeks at a time, not
Mm,
showing up over there, not answering his phone, and not weeks, but like a week would
mm-hmm.
go by, and they would reach out and say, have you heard from him? Well, no, well, he's not answering his phone. So then somebody would need to go drive over there and see kind of what was going on. And he would just drop out for periods of time.
Mm,
He wouldn't let anybody into his apartment, and we found out why. There were some things going on in his apartment that we had to deal with that were really unpleasant and unhealthy. Um, we we were on the same page. It's funny. It's like an accelerated, when you have something like that to focus on, it accelerates some healing, or it pushes some stuff to the side and allows you to get focused on the thing that needs to be dealt with, which is what's going on with dad.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful that your family was able to do that. I think a lot of families also experience a greater divide, like they dig their
Yeah.
heels in,
Yeah.
that my position is correct.
Yeah.
And so it can be hard for families to come
Yeah.
together.
I feel like we're really lucky that way. I mean, we had I guess we had a unique enough situation that there wasn't really anything, there wasn't really any big issue. It was just a lack of connection
Yeah,
that we had allowed, over
yeah,
time. And I'm in my 50s, so we're all in our kids are all 30s, 40s, 50s, mom's in her 70s, um and they weren't married.
hmm,
They'd been divorced since I was a teenager. So, but really his son and his ex-wife were his people. These
mm,
were the people that were part of his daily life. So the three of them were really united. And they brought me in to say, we need your help.
wow,
Like
that's
we can't.
powerful.
And so I said, okay, what are we looking at here? So yes, I want to give my family a lot of credit for just doing that. It was
Right.
really, that was never a question. Um, and so, did that answer your question?
It did answer my
Okay.
question. Yeah. No, I think I was really blessed because I cared for both of my grandmothers for 7 years, and she had four daughters. Two of them have since passed away. Two of my aunts have passed away, but I had all family support. Like
Yeah.
my caregiving experience was so much love and gratitude.
Mhm.
And then my mom would fly in, as backup, and we talked almost, I mean, we still speak almost
Yeah.
daily. Um, so
That's awesome.
it really helps if the family
It
can
does.
collaborate.
It does. And when it became clear that some major decisions needed to be made, and when it became clear that he was not necessarily going to be a helpful part of the process, in terms of making
Yeah,
decisions that needed to be made relative to his apartment and to his belongings and to his care,
right.
um, we, my mom and brother and I were able to work together to create uh, the most productive path forward that we could. And so it became really clear that he was going to need to be out of his apartment and somewhere else. And if you had asked me um, in September, would you bring him home to live with you? My answer would have, after a long laugh, would have been no, no, I'm not
Right.
doing that. But when we were clear that his care was unacceptable, um, when we were clear that his fate was kind of getting sealed in that sort of sea of neglect and a lack of contact with his people, um, it was not hard at all to make the decision to bring him home. And
Right.
with um, with how hospice works here, it was a seamless transition. It was quick. It was of no cost to us.
Hmm.
It was extraordinary how their presence in the process facilitated us showing up for him the way we wanted to.
It's nice to have that third party, sort of a neutral third party that
Yeah.
are experts in what they do. And I
Yeah.
really love that you all were willing to step into that, because I think a lot of families are reluctant. Like
Yeah.
it's
He
so
didn't want it.
hard. Yeah.
He did not want it. And so we had to couch it with him in such a way to say, Dad, if you want to not go back to that place, this is our only option right now. This is an immediate option that gets you into our home, that gets you the equipment and the care and the resources that we need to make better decisions later. But we can't send you back there.
Right.
You don't want to go back there, and we don't want you to go back there. And this is an
Right.
immediate way for you to come home. And he said, okay. But what I've heard often, his biggest resistance was having to be his toileting needs being taken care of, right? Like, because he was bedbound.
Mm,
So he knew that that meant that I was going to have to do some things that he wasn't interested in me doing, and that I wasn't necessarily interested in doing. But he was really worried about that. Like that was I think that was something that had been on his mind and heart a lot longer than any of us could imagine.
right.
I think it was one of the things that made him think it was okay for him to stay where he was, because at least we wouldn't be dealing with that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we quickly got through that. It was an unpleasant first night, and then we just we just you know and then we figured some things out. Those nurses know some tricks, man. When they teach you how to change a bed with a grown man in it, and they teach
Mhm.
you how to roll people over, it's like, why didn't I know this when I had kids? Like, this would have been helpful when I had children,
This is
right?
like life
This is
skills.
amazing. This is a
Yeah.
life skill. You don't need to learn how to fold a fitted sheet. No, but you need to know how to change a sheet with a grown person in it. That's
Right.
amazing.
With yeah,
Yeah.
that's hilarious. Well, and I
Uh,
think to your point, you do enter some really sensitive personal territory when
yeah.
when you start to care for someone and that hands on.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
dignity issue and a privacy issue. But it sounds like both of you were kind of able to wrap your heads around it
We
and
were.
push
It
through
was a
it.
process, right? Like anything.
Yes.
Again, that this acceleration that I spoke of earlier, in terms of our ability to come together without a whole lot of, like, healing or
Hmm.
discussion or conversation, it just sort of made the thing at hand most relevant. I think that's what happened for Dad and I around these things.
Yeah.
It was just like, well, we really have fewer options. This is what needs to happen. And so we will find our way to do this. And sometimes we're easier than others.
Right.
If I
No, for
took too long or
sure.
talked too much, or, like, we found our way and learned to talk to each other a little bit about it, and found some humor in it, and made the best of it.
Yeah. And I think the fact that the family was willing, like you were educated on hospice
Yes.
and how they could be of value to you. Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of families feel like, well, that's just literally for the last 12 hours of life. And I think they
Yeah.
don't understand what value they could get out of it.
Mhm.
Can
And
you?
for how long? Like, she said
Right.
we can have people for a year or two. It's really a philosophy,
Yes.
comfort. It doesn't mean that you don't get a nurse when you have a situation. It doesn't mean that you don't get visited by a doctor, or that you're not cared for and that you're not treated. It
Right.
means that you are made sure everything you need to be comfortable and safe is there for you.
Mm,
And it's not about rushing to the hospital every time something goes wrong, but it's about figuring out how to navigate your body's um, death process,
right. And people
and
can graduate.
that's right. That's right. That's what he had a lot of issues with vocabulary, and
Hmm.
so we had to do some work around that, and basically I think he was upset towards the end when a nurse told him kind of the maybe a timeline of how she felt like things were going, and he was really upset by it. And I said, Dad, if you feel differently, trust that. She's only going by what she knows, by what
Right.
she's seen and what she's experiencing. She was not saying that to hurt you. She was doing her best to tell you the truth. And if you don't believe that, if that doesn't feel true to you, then you go with what you got. Because
Right.
we're going to be here regardless.
Right.
We're not going anywhere. We're
Yeah.
here. We're here. So, you know, she has a feeling, you have a feeling, go with your feeling. If
Right.
that's how
Absolutely.
feeling about it. And then of course I, had a conversation with her about, probably easy on the doomsday clock, and it's all, it's all good. He did well. He recovered well.
Well, and to your dad's point, Dr. Bruce Lipton wrote that book, Biology of Belief. I don't know if you've read that,
I
but
haven't. That's
it's fascinating. He really unpacks how our thoughts and beliefs can transform our healing
mhm,
or life experience. Biology of
mhm.
Belief. it is really fascinating what our brains can do when we make a decision about that. And I'm a coach and you're a coach, so we both
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a lot
Um,
of mindset work on that man in that bed. So
yes,
and on the woman in that chair, you know, like we were both doing our work. For sure.
right. Wow, what a
Yeah.
blessing. I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
really, I'm kind of skipping back, but really innovative to come up with the idea to work at the building he lived in for that
I'm
short
telling you
time.
what, I just don't take no for an answer. I mean, like that's my, you know, that's kind of my gift with clients is when they keep bumping into that wall of I'm always the what if it's possible person or what would it look like
Yes,
if it worked person. And I just can't get to a place where the answer is no, you don't have access to your father. That just wasn't acceptable to me. So it didn't
right.
occur to me to not do whatever it was that I took. Now, I did, after I got the job, I did have that moment of what in the hell have you done? What have you done, child? What have you really done? Do you know what this means? You have to actually go to work there.
Right,
Oh,
like,
no.
yeah, you don't just get the badge.
I mean, I think that was part of in the back of my head. That was kind of part of the deal, but it was a great source of delight and conversation in the family. Like
Yeah,
everybody was like, "Man, you just don't give up, do you?" I was like, "When have I ever?" Like,
right,
are you not? Are you new?
right,
This is who I've
yeah.
always been since I was 2. You know,
Have you
so
have you done your Clifton strengths? Do you have maximizer in your strengths?
I do.
Yeah, so do I. It's like there's
Yeah,
always a better way. I know,
always.
I
So
always
it
like I
was.
know.
I kind of prayed about it too. I was like, if this is meant to be, let this be easy. You know, like I certainly on paper don't look like the kind of person who is qualified for that kitchen job.
Mhm.
So I was really concerned about that because it had been 40, I don't know, maybe 35 years since I'd worked in a restaurant or a kitchen, you know.
Yeah.
And so I said, when he asked me about my experience, I said, well, I worked in the restaurant business from the time that I was 14 until I was, 24. So I have 10 years of experience. And he was like, okay, 10 years of experience. Like it was so easy. They just
Yeah.
processed
Yeah, that's good.
and 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 the rest is I mean, when I showed up, he just looked, I didn't tell him because I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. I didn't want to, it was hard to talk to him on the phone. He just
Yeah.
didn't like talking on the phone. He didn't want to do FaceTime. And so I got finished with my interview and I said, "Can I see him now?" And the guy looked at me and he goes, "Well," and the nurse who had done my drug test or whatever, she said, "Why don't you give her a tour of the building?"
Oh,
They walked me straight back to him. Like
yeah.
it was such a validation that
Yes,
okay,
yes.
you're in. And so they
Yeah.
took me back to see him. It was the first time I'd seen him in months.
Yeah.
And so it was just, and he just was just stunned. "What do you mean you're working here? You have a business. What are you doing?" And I said, "Don't worry about what I'm doing. Just know that I'll be here.
Oh
See
my
you next,
gosh.
like I'm going to see you soon." He was like, "What?
This makes me all
What do you
teary.
mean?" Oh, well, yeah, I think about
Yeah.
it too and get a little teary, but that look on his face, he was really just like, could not believe it.
Yeah.
And then the day that I showed up for orientation, I walked by his room. I stuck my head and I said, "I'm going to orientation." He said, "Come in here." And I came in. He said, "I don't want you to work here." And I said,
What?
"Why don't you want me to work here?" And he said, "Because this is where people are getting sick. I don't want you to get sick. I don't want, you've got
Oh,
those babies at home and I don't want you to get sick." And I said, "Dad, I'm going to take care of myself. I promise.
yeah.
I'll come see you
Oh,
after orientation." But he said, "I don't want you to work here. I want you to look at the news." And I said, "Okay, I'll come back and talk to you." But
yeah.
he was really concerned. He was worried. And then he was grateful.
Mm,
He would say, "Just sit with me for a while." I'd come up at every break and sit with him. And, his diet, he wasn't eating. He was basically malnourished.
mm,
And I was able to take care of that while I was there, bringing him other things that I knew he would like.
mhm.
And then with me there, helping him eat it
Right.
because he had trouble with that. And I, um, I got clear about the kinds of things that they were aware of and the kind of things that they weren't aware of. And
Right.
it just got really clear that this was a deteriorating situation. So I talked to my mom and my brother and I said, I think they're going to let you have a visit with him tomorrow. They were like loosening things up a bit.
Yeah.
And so I said, when you come in, I think you will agree with me that he has to get out of there, and that he has to get out of there soon. And Chris and I are willing to take him home as my husband.
Mm-hmm.
We're willing to bring him home, but I have to have your help. Like, I have to have your help.
Right.
So if you don't agree with me, then we need to have a conversation. But if you agree with me, we have to get him out of there fast. And I need you and Jason on board. And she said, okay. And when they got there, sure enough, it was so clear to both of them.
Yeah.
And that was the first time they'd been able to see him other than through glass a couple of times. And they agreed, and he was out of his mind. His blood sugar had dropped. And so my mom, who's a retired nurse, suggested that they let him go to the hospital to be checked out. And he never went back.
Mm.
We went in and got his personal belongings, and I quit.
Yeah. You were going to keep that job.
I quit.
It's so brilliant that, I mean, you had to have a lot of confidence in saying, I'm going to need help.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, because I think the caregivers are burning out our minute by minute every day.
Yeah.
And they'll have family members who say, oh yeah, we'll help, but then they don't. And I think it's just, as a caregiver, it's so important to make the boundaries clear, ask for the help, and be specific. Like, people, when they say, I'm going to need help, like, say, I need you to handle picking up medication and being really specific.
Yeah, we did that. We really did. Again, my mom being a former nurse, that gave all of us a level of comfort in knowing that we weren't gonna hurt him.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And then hospice being in several times a week to check on things, and hospice being available 24/7 if I had any questions about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'll remember the first night that they brought him home, and the hospice nurse came over, but it was really not about getting him set up as much as getting the intake stuff done. And then the nurse was coming the next day. And when she left, I remember Chris and I just looking at each other and looking at Dad in the bed, like, what have we done? Like, what are we going to do now?
Again, what have we done?
What are we going to do? Like, what? And then he said, I think I need to be changed. And Chris and I were like, what does that mean? And I am immediately thinking of my grandchildren and changing kids. And I'm looking at his
like
body, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
They do this. So then we looked up a YouTube video, on how to change.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
We look up this YouTube video, and it's this tiny, small 80-pound woman who's not soiled that they're doing the demonstration on. So it looks real easy. And I'm like looking at this 200 something pound man. No, he's probably much less than that at the time. He was really skinny, maybe 170, 6'2",
Yeah.
and thinking, did you see any of that in this? Like, what we made a mess of it, and we did it. And then the nurse came the next day and showed us. But, even my mom, like, her strength and the leverage that you can get from a sheet and the things that you can do to make that easier, that for us, I think was a big, for all of us was a big, we can ask for help. We cannot know how to do things. We don't have to be embarrassed.
Right.
We can just be curious, and we'll figure this out. But Mom's role was to come, every day, to give me a couple of hours to just do something else.
Wow.
To either work or to do something. And just her simple presence here was just so comforting. Or she would write on the top of the med bottles, or whatever she was doing.
Yeah.
And then my brother's role would be to come in the evening and sit with him and just shoot the breeze, or watch TV or hang out, so that my husband and I could have dinner and just sit and relax. And we got into a good rhythm of it, and everybody did their part. And and I will tell you too that a lot of my friends and people who had been through this were like, what can we do for you? How can we help? And of course, I didn't know how to ask for help from them.
Right.
Because that's really hard. It was fine when I had a job for somebody to do in the house, but with COVID, we weren't inviting a lot of people in the house. It was only family. It was people who we hadn't seen in, since maybe Christmas, some of them. We wanted to make sure that happened. But people did the most amazing things and taught me how to take care of other people who are going through this. They just dropped things by on the porch and then would text and say, there's a little something on your porch. Have a good day.
Oh,
Or, and they would be spaghetti jars with, little quotes on them, and wildflowers from their garden, and energizing tea and chocolate, and a couple of home-baked loaves of a family recipe bread with some butter, and meals. Oh my gosh, the meals that people would bring, and
right.
all of those, and the little cards in the mail. Just all of those little things meant so much and helped me feel so much less alone.
Mm,
And then I wrote a lot during that time. I wrote a lot. I shared a lot on my social media platforms. And that is where the guts of this next morning meditation books will come from, is just the other caregivers who reached out to me, who helped me understand what was going to be happening and what I might be going through, and validating what I was having in the moment, and not trying to fix it or change it.
right.
Honor it, and to say, yeah, this is what this feels like, was really helpful. And just not expecting me to figure out what I needed, but just tapping me on the shoulder in some way and saying, we love you. But the meals and the little treats and the little flowers, there were fresh flowers everywhere in this house at all times, and it was wonderful.
Oh, that is wonderful. And that's so helpful, because people want to help. And
Yeah.
it's hard to think past like the task at hand.
Yeah.
And I think it's critical for caregivers to let people in. It's so isolating.
It is so isolating. And, I think maybe one of my favorite gifts came very early in the process. A good friend, like, again, we're talking about this changing piece, like this
Mhm.
so hard. I had gotten baby wipes at the store. And let me just tell you something. You need a bigger wipe.
That's
Right.
not
And
gonna do
there
it.
are
Yes.
such a thing. There's
Yes.
such a thing. And I didn't know. Just didn't know. And so my girlfriend, who'd known my father, and we've been friends for our whole lives, showed up with 3 giant packs of adult wipes. And I
Oh
was like, you are my savior. Like, this is going to change my life.
yeah, literally a game changer. That is so funny.
Great. It was just so hilarious. You don't know what you don't know. Right. Like, you just don't. And
Right.
she was just right on it. Like, it was like a group text, and I was like, baby wipes don't do the job. And she was on it like the next day on my porch. And that was really
that is hilarious. And again, like, when you're in it, you don't have the foresight to like think there's another way.
No, no, you don't. So it, and I think that was probably my greatest gift, was being cared for. So from a distance, and with such love and with such presence.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know how to do that for other people when they're going through grief. And I just didn't know. I think most of us don't until we know someone really well who is dealing with it.
Right.
And we have some kind of insight as to the things that comfort them, or the things that delight them, or the things that touch their heart. And, using that, you don't have to know how, you can't fix it, but you can delight them. You can surprise them. You can not disappear.
Yes.
You can stay in relationship and not worry that it's a problem or any of those things. But
well, honestly,
a lot of really great people around me.
I think your book would be one of those things that could delight people. So tell me more about the one that's already published and the one that's coming up, because I think that's a great example of something that's just little, that someone wouldn't think of, but could add so much.
So, Morning Meditation Nuggets is the name of the sort of the franchise, if you will. But basically, I have a morning practice. And every morning I get up and I get my coffee, and I come into my Zen den here, and I sit and I get quiet and still. I meditate. I listen to music. I write. I read inspirational things. Sometimes it's just a devotional. I read Being Mortal, which is a great book, while Dad was here. So there were some things that I was reading that were focused on grief and family dynamics, but a lot of it was just inspiration. And then from that would come this nugget of like wisdom, or this nugget of insight, or this nugget of something that I would then sort of pontificate on a little bit. And that's what these are filled with. This first book is just 15 of those little things. So someone could pick it up at any given time and read something on presence, or on freedom, or on courage, or on acceptance. And those were the inspirational devotional messages that meant the most to me at that, at that time.
Right.
And this was in the sort of in the beginning of the pandemic. And when I realized that those moments, I wasn't able to have my morning practice in the same way that I always did, because our schedule was so defined by his needs and his schedule.
Right.
But what I found was that there would be any time during the day I could create that space, I would do it, so, and I needed it a few more times than just one. So oftentimes there were 2 or 3 times a day where I needed to sit down and refill my tank. And that's what I hope the caregiver book will be focused on, is more of those moments where they can just sit down and put their headphones on and listen to something that lifts their spirit and soul, and read something that gives them courage and perspective, or validates what they're going through.
Right.
And then they can take a deep breath and suit back up and show back up, and do the work that they're being called to do, to love someone through their illness, or their walk them home, And I meant to show a picture of my dad. Like I said, my dad was kind of a grumpy old cuss, kind of a grumpy old man. And it was rare that I would get to take a picture of him, but here's a picture of him. He and I at Keeneland racetrack. He loved horses and horse racing. But while I was taking care of him, we were arguing frequently. Our dynamic was finding itself, right? And this is a picture of him when he was like 19.
Oh my gosh.
And I put this up on my wall in my Zen den, because I needed to remember that this is the man who is laying in that bed.
Yes.
Right? That this is the boy. And then there was another picture of him that everybody in my family just fell in love with, because it was such the essence of him.
Oh.
Like the essence of this man coming into his own, and stepping into his life. And we were blessed to care for him as he was stepping out of it. And I just didn't want to forget who this guy was.
Oh, Whitney, that's beautiful.
And so I still have it. I just took it off there. I'm going to put it back up, but it just made me, and it made everybody else in the family so happy to remember him in that way. He looked very different in bed.
Yeah.
And so thin, so emaciated. And it was really comforting for us to have these pictures and these moments that we could remember that this is the man who's laying in that bed.
That is such a great idea. That is such a great idea. Can I offer that to other people?
Please do. And I'll tell you, I worked in the facility too, because day 2, my second shift in there, I took some pictures in there of he and I. And I said, this is who I'm showing up in there for. This is not who you see in there, but this is who I see in there. And then I had pictures of him from when we were little, when he adopted me, and when we, got to be together. And I said, this is why I'm here. I'm not here to do the dishes.
Right.
I'm not here to do anything other than make sure that he gets what he needs. And I need you to know who he is.
Yeah.
And he's not going to wake up when you come in there and bring his breakfast to him, and he can't feed himself. So I need somebody to help him eat. So who's going to help this guy eat? And it really made a big difference, I think, in how he was seen and perceived. Instead of being a non-compliant, difficult person, he was seen more as a man who had a family who was deeply concerned about what was happening with him, whose needs weren't being met. And I think that it personalized it for them in a way that they could understand. They weren't doing anything wrong, per se. Okay. But they were not there for him. I was there for him.
Right.
And it was very clear from the moment that I stepped foot in that building that that's who I was there for. So, I don't know if I
No
made an ideal
mysteries.
employee. Let's don't get it twisted.
Yeah, no mysteries. Well,
So,
I am
thank you.
excited about your book and helping
Thank
spread the word about it. And I think that just this conversation demystifies meditation a little bit, because I think
you. Yeah,
sometimes people get, I don't want to say confused, but or just have been
yeah,
misled that it's some boogie woogie spiritual practice, you know?
yeah. Yeah. And if I could offer, one of the things that I talk with my clients about is just creating that, thinking of your five senses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that you can smell that calms you down, something that you can see um, that reminds you or gives you
Yes.
perspective, something that you can touch. I'm a knitter. So, the blankets that we used in his room were soft and, just things for him too, to think, comforting things. What is it that you could feel that feels good? What do you need to listen to? There are some people who don't respond to music, but I don't understand them. But
Mm-hmm.
if you just put your headphones on and listen to a song that just moves through you, like how amazing that is.
Right.
And and then, what is something that you could drink or eat that tastes good, that is comforting? Like that's meditation. It's
Yes.
it's getting still and being fully present and being in the moment, and then taking a breath and staying in the next moment and the next moment, and then saying, okay, now I'm going into that moment. I'm going back into
Right.
care. I'm going back in to do that. But it's really a
Right.
practice in learning how to be fully present.
And as you pointed out, it's multiple times throughout the day. It's not like sit down for a dedicated hour.
Right.
It can be like multiple times throughout the day.
It can be going to the bathroom. That's my favorite place to
Yeah,
tell
it's like
people to,
quiet. Nobody's,
yeah,
yeah,
just sit and just like breathe and come to the moment. That's
right.
the gift. We need that.
Well, thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation
Thank you,
with
Michelle.
a caregiver for caregivers. So I really appreciate you and your time and you sharing your journey with me. It's very personal. So I do
Yes,
appreciate that.
it is personal. And for the people who are doing it, I think until you do it, you just can't understand
Mm,
what it's like to do it. And
right.
the small ways in which people um, left messages and shared just meant so much to us. So don't forget, it doesn't have to be a big grand gesture, just something simple as I see you and I love you.
Yes.
I'm thinking about you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I just so
My pleasure,
appreciate
Michelle.
you.
Thank you.